Perfect. And if we're all ready, we'll begin in 10.
And we are streaming.
Great. We'll begin in 5 seconds. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm just going to go over a few housekeeping norms before we get started. And if you have a question during our question and answer session, please submit via the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. And with that, the program will begin.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Katie Vlietstra-Wannenberg. I'm Secretary of the Public-Private Strategies Institute. On behalf of the Public-Private Strategies Institute, we are excited to host this important and timely briefing in conjunction with our stakeholders that have come together today for a conversation with Reta Jo Lewis, President and Chair of the Board of Directors of the Export-Import Bank of the U.S., and Sameera Fazili, Deputy Assistant to the President and Deputy Director of the White House National Economic Council. Among the many topics I know they will touch on, they will share details on the bank's most recent announcement related to the administration's Make More in America initiative and its potential impact for small businesses. The Business Leader Briefing Series provides an opportunity for small business owners to engage with leaders across the federal government to ensure small business leaders like you have a seat at the table to share what's most important to you. And so we are so glad you are here to join us for this excellent conversation. I'd also like to take a moment to thank our partners for engaging and inviting their members from across the country. We have a great group of partners who are listed on the screen, and they represent such a wide, diverse of our strong and rich business community. So thank you so much for all of you participating in today's event. Before we get started, I do want to reiterate a few items. Please note that this briefing is being recorded and there may be reporters present. After today's briefing, we will send you a link to the recording, which will also be available on the Public-Private Strategies Institute Facebook page. I'm so thrilled to now introduce Chair Reta Jo Lewis. Launched during the Great Depression, the Export-Import Bank of the United States assists in the financing and facilitation of U.S. businesses exporting their goods and services abroad. In fiscal year 2021, EXIM authorized $5.8 billion in loan guarantees, insurance, and direct loans to support an estimated $9.2 billion in U.S. export sales. As President and Chair of EXIM's Board of Directors, Reta Jo Lewis oversees the agency's entire portfolio of work. Chair Lewis has over 25 years of leadership experience in international affairs, legal, public policy, business, and regulatory affairs, and subnational diplomacy. Chair Lewis is also the first Black woman to hold this critical post. Chair Lewis, we're so thrilled to have you with us this morning, and I'll turn it over to you.
No, I am even more thrilled to be here with all of you. I want to thank Public-Private Strategies Institute for hosting this business leaders briefing. And I'm excited also to be joined by my White House colleague, Sameera Fazili, who has been really working very closely with all of us in the rollout of this initiative that was announced last week at EXIM's Board of Directors. You know, for all of us, it was the Board of Directors unanimously approved a new, what we call a domestic financing initiative, or what we call Make More in America, because it is an innovative solution for, we believe, for American exporters. This new initiative fulfills a very key mission identified in the Biden administration's executive order on supply chains. This new program, or this new initiative, will provide key financing tools that help ensure goods and services in critical industries like semiconductors, which we hope are made in the United States, not in strategic competitor nations like China. You know, we all have gone through the COVID-19 pandemic. And we understand that recent global events have laid bare shortcomings in America's production and shipment in key sectors like advanced manufacturing and clean energy technology. We know that China is making massive and historic investments in producing these key goods, and America is at risk of falling behind. So not only did I support this, the board unanimously supported this initiative because we know that America must leverage all the tools at our disposal from both the public and the private sector, and that includes EXIM. EXIM's new financing will extend the agency's existing offerings, loan guarantees, and insurance to specific types of domestic transactions with an export nexus. By complementing EXIM's traditional foreign buyer financing programs, EXIMs can contribute to the growth and security of critical supply chains while continuing to meet our core mission, which is supporting US jobs. So Make More in America's financing will provide support across the entire export life cycle. It's going to be from capital investments to enable production capacity and working capital to support production, to export credit insurance and buyer financing to win specific export sales. We know that these tools will help build resilient supply chains that protect and strengthen America's economic and national security. But we know it's also very important that these projects will continue to undergo EXIM's traditional due diligence requirements and procedures to ensure that all of our financing does not compete with the private sector and other government financing programs, such as Small Business Administration, US Department of Energy Loan Program, or the US Department of Transportation. We will be working with all of those agencies, and we are excited that the administration has joined us in that effort. These agencies will also help, this agency as an EXIM will also continue what we call our prudent underwriting standards that have allowed it to operate at no cost to US taxpayers. To ensure the Make More in America initiative upholds a high standard of transparency and fulfills the agency's stewardship of taxpayers' dollars, EXIM is going to be taking additional steps. Those steps will include requiring every transaction, no matter the size, to undergo board review and approval. We will also be having congressional notification for projects over $50 million. There will be an annual reporting also on export and job performance for each transaction. So we're committed to continue dialogue with our stakeholders like yourselves to ensure that Make More in America hits the mark now and into the future. We know that by extending EXIM's financing to export-oriented American manufacturing, that EXIM will be standing ready to help American exporters compete in the global economy to build a better America. You will be joined on this call by several senior executives from EXIM, and we hope that you have numerous questions to ask about this new initiative at EXIM that we're so excited about. And furthermore, we'll also hear Sameera talk about, as we have, about our continued and very laser focus on the support for small business. So thank you for all of you being on this call today, and I look forward to hearing more about the work and look forward to hearing more questions that you may have about this initiative. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Chair Lewis, for being with us today and sharing a little bit about how the Export-Import Bank is really taking the reins in the Make More in America initiative and supporting small businesses. It is a great day in America for small businesses, and we couldn't thank the bank more for this exciting initiative. As you just said, you do have two senior level staff members who are joining us today for Q&A, who can talk more about the specifics about the domestic financing program, in addition to other activities that the bank is undertaking in support of manufacturing and supply chain activities. So I want to thank you and your staff for spending such a tremendous amount of time with us today. It really means a lot. And I know that you have a busy day and a lot going on. So I am really thrilled that we are also joined by Sameera Fazili. She is the Deputy Director of the National Economic Council in the Biden-Harris administration. Before joining the National Economic Council, she served as the Director of Engagement for the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta's Community and Economic Development Department. Sameera, we're so thrilled to have you with us today as well. So I'll turn it over to you for some opening comments.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for having me here today. You know, the work EXIM is doing through its Make More in America initiative is part of a larger 21st century industrial strategy that we here in the Biden administration have been executing on. And small businesses like yourselves are a strategy. What we've been seeing recently is really a global rethinking of decades of economic doctrine by both companies in the private sector and by governments, not just in the US, but around the world. You've seen things like just-in-time production, outsourcing consolidation, short-term quarterly mindsets, left our supply chains really vulnerable to shocks. And we all saw this loud and clear during the pandemic when we couldn't make simple masks and PPE here in the US anymore. And then when the chip shortage led to production delays and contributed to 1/3 of last year's inflation. Companies have seen impacts to their bottom line of this kind of short-term thinking. Over the course of a decade, we now know that almost 45% of a firm's annual profits is often lost due to supply chain disruptions because they've gone up in frequency and in value. And as Chair Lewis laid out, we've hollowed out our manufacturing industrial base here in the US. And that has really weakened not just our economic growth outlook and our economic security, but our national security. And finally, we've seen our administration in particular really lay out a new vision of globalization and how it needs to function so that it better supports the middle class, workers, and small businesses. That's really built upon a foundation of not retreating from the world, but strengthening our alliances, especially with countries that share our values and our interests. We think the strategy that we've laid out is so important because you're seeing the pace of technological change accelerating. We know that businesses like yours are facing production process changes, transformations in the modern workplace, new digital technologies entering. The pace of climate change has been accelerating, and that is requiring businesses to adapt and pivot to new strategies to address for climate risk. And also to see what they can do to be part of that solution to decarbonize their own supply chains and their own operations. And then, unfortunately, Putin's unjustified invasion of Ukraine has really made much more real to everyone just how uncertain today's geopolitical environment is. So a huge cornerstone of this industrial strategy has been strengthening the resilience of critical supply chains here in the US and reinvesting in our innovation and manufacturing capacity. Since the campaign, the president has really emphasized this point that he not only wants to take action to close weaknesses and vulnerabilities. What we have done as a federal government since taking office in this area has been equal part doing deep diagnostic work as well as laying out prescriptions and action plans that are multi-year, multi-agency on how we address gaps in key products and key sectors of our economy. I'm going to lay out some of those sectors and products because we think the EXIM's Make More in America initiative can play a leading role closing those vulnerabilities, helping expand domestic companies and domestic production in some of these areas, but also helping us, the U.S., become a global leader in these industries by exporting our goods in these industries. So on the product side, we focused on advanced pharmaceutical ingredients, on critical minerals like lithium and rare earths and nickel, advanced batteries like electric vehicle batteries, stationary storage batteries, There's a lot of technology and component parts that go into building an advanced battery, and these batteries are so important to our clean energy future, which is an electric future. And then semiconductors, which Chair Lewis already touched on. From an industry's perspective, we've been looking at ways to strengthen our industrial base across the defense sector, the transportation sector, the information and communication technology sector, agriculture, and public health. For those interested in seeing these action plans, I would direct you to look at the reports that a set of agencies have issued under Executive Order 14017. The agencies that have issued these include the Department of Energy, Department of Defense, Department of Commerce, Health and Human Services, Department of Agriculture, and Department of Transportation. And what you'll find are these multi-year, multi-agency plans on how do we rebuild America's supply chains towards resilience, security, and sustainability, and lead the world in fields as diverse as AI and quantum computing, to solar energy, to mineral production and processing. The beauty of the EXIM initiative truly is that it allows us to both invest domestically, especially in domestic manufacturing, while also advancing our integration in global markets and advancing our partnerships with allies and partners. Our goal here is, in our supply chain work and in our domestic manufacturing work, is not to onshore and reshore every single product to the US. That's not feasible or desirable. We need to continue to have smart globalization, fairer trade. We also know that for this strategy to be successful, we need to have targeted support for small businesses and small manufacturers in particular. In all of our listening sessions and all of our research, we are acutely aware that they face challenges accessing capital to upgrade and expand their facilities. They need access to capital, like working capital loans, especially in this moment of supply chain strains. And at the end of the day, the heart of our domestic industrial base is small and medium-sized firms. They account for over 40% of jobs in manufacturing and over 90% of firms. But the data over the recent years has showed productivity slowing at these firms, that they're not able to make the capital investments they need to keep pace with technological changes in manufacturing. They're not able to make the investments they want to be able to make to raise their productivity. And EXIM's tool is now going to be available to these companies to help them make those upgrades and help them reach new markets around the world. We know that capital alone is never enough to solve the problems that small businesses are facing, and that is why we hope companies like yours combine EXIM support with the support available to you through the Small Business Administration, the Department of Commerce, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which each offer a different array of technical assistance programs that are designed to meet you where you are and help you navigate and access all these different government programs that are available to you. Many of these agencies have offices in your state and local communities, from small business development centers run by the SBA to minority business centers and export assistance centers run by the Department of Commerce. So in closing, I want to note that we are proud of the economic recovery the president's policies have led to. When the pandemic began, our economy suffered its sharpest contraction since the end of the Second World War. We had job losses that were the worst since the Great Depression, and communities of color and young people were especially hard hit. When the president came to office last year, he wanted to take a new course and put the country on a new course. He took immediate action to fight the virus and deliver economic relief. And as a result, a direct result of the president's bold strategy, we've seen the strongest recovery in modern history, the fastest economic growth in nearly 4 decades, the strongest labor market recovery ever recorded, and especially progress for Black and Hispanic Americans and the long-term unemployed and others who have often been left behind in past recoveries that have been very slow growth. But we know that the global economy still faces a set of challenges. We're all seeing that price price increases and inflation are impacting consumers and businesses alike, that supply chains are still too snarled on the transportation side, and disruptions abroad, like Putin's invasion of Ukraine, have led to further questions about supply chains and your ability to get the products you need from the companies you work with overseas. We feel fortunate that we in the U.S. are able to approach these new challenges from a position of unique strength compared to other countries in the world. And the type of work EXIM is doing to strengthen our supply chains and domestic manufacturing and make sure that businesses across America are able to grow and thrive. It's work that we actually think could be further supercharged if Congress acts quickly to send another piece of legislation to the president's desk, which is called the Bipartisan Innovation Act. This bipartisan legislation, which has already passed the House and the Senate, and in May, Congress will begin its conference process, will help reclaim America's leadership in semiconductors by offering R&D and manufacturing incentives to that industry. It'll authorize historic investments in basic R&D, which will advance our leadership in technologies like artificial intelligence and 3D printing and biotechnology. And it's going to generate new economic development incentives and programs to spur innovations in places that have been previously left behind. So I hope you will join us in calling on Congress to support swift passage of this bill, which in partnership with programs like EXIM's new Make It in America initiative are going to supercharge growth here in the U.S. and make it so that we can outcompete and out-innovate the rest of the world. Thank you.
Well, fantastic. Thank you, Sameera, for those comments. And the chat was, or the Q&A was, I would use the word, it was running hot with a lot of questions, a lot of excitement. So I want to go ahead and pull in Stephanie Dethridge and Scott Condren from the Export-Import Bank, and for the four of us to have a little conversation, and to my best, and I will, to the best of my ability, hopefully weave in some of those questions that were coming through from our business owners on the line. And I think, Sameera, if I can maybe turn to you first with a question, and I am going to try to weave in a little bit of what we're hearing in the chat, which is, there is a lot going on as it relates to our economy. And as you concluded your remarks, the Biden-Harris administration has continued to not only deploy resources, but I think work towards innovation in determining ways in which the federal government can help small businesses recover from the pandemic and contraction. But I think that there's still concern or angst out there within the small business community that, in many ways that recovery is slipping away from them, that there are really big issues, as you mentioned, the chip shortage, challenges with now Putin's war with Ukraine. Where are you? What are you most excited about? What are the things that you really want to make sure that these hundreds of business owners here on the call today related to that very specific efforts for recovery for the small business sector by the Biden-Harris administration?
Yeah, thanks for that question. One, we know that the programs we put in place last year, like the Paycheck Protection Program, the COVID EIDL program, have created an environment that has helped foster entrepreneurship. And we were able to get over $450 billion in emergency relief to help existing small businesses get to the other side of the pandemic. Now that we are, the pandemic is now more endemic. Every wave that has gone on has been less disruptive to our economy, and that's a good thing. We also, through the American Rescue Plan, put in place a number of supports that would help small businesses be able to grow past the recovery, not just have a bridge, but grow even further. And so we have in place a program called the State Small Business Credit Initiative that the Treasury Department is making essentially block grants to states, and states are setting up new small business financing programs. Each of the states now has a plan and has received an allocation. And so over the course of this year, you will see your governors announcing the initiatives that they have stood up using the Treasury Department State Small Business Credit Initiative funding. That money is going to go towards equity, not just loan capital, and it's going to be deployed. It has like a leverage requirement, so it's going to be deployed through financial institutions. It also has a real focus on small and disadvantaged businesses, and so we should see that money hitting the street by this summer. The first wave of programs are going to launch. And then another important new support we have put out there is a new Community Navigators program. It's a $100 million program. We launched it last year, back in December. We have grantees who got announced. By October, our grantees had been announced. And we now have a set of navigators around the country who reach down to the smallest of small businesses and have a focus on veterans, women, and socially and economically disadvantaged individuals to provide technical assistance and close resource gaps that they face across urban and rural America. So those are two relatively new supports that are out there to help small businesses and to help them recover and help them keep growing in this recovery.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sameera. Scott, Stephanie, if I can maybe turn to you, there's also been quite a bit of questions related to what Chair Lewis was speaking to around the new domestic financing program in support of the Make More in America initiative. And I think there are a couple of things that hopefully Scott and Stephanie, you can weave in is, is this truly a focus on small businesses to access new financing to perhaps jumpstart their entry into exporting and manufacturing, and what are the mechanics of the program? And then I did think, could we have a clarifying question around the chair mentioned that the board will be reviewing each of these projects, and I think there's just a question about is that the most efficient way to get funds out the door? And if that is the case, is there somewhat of a floor that you're looking for businesses to engage in this new domestic financing program? So Scott, Stephanie, I open it up to you to talk about the program and hopefully answer a couple of those questions.
Sure, I'm happy to help to start. So the initiative is definitely open to small businesses. We want to support small businesses. We see this, I would say we see this as a complement to the great work SBA and other agencies are already doing to help small businesses. We're looking to bring incremental capacity to the market, not replace something someone else is already doing. We have a couple of features that are really designed to help small businesses. The required export threshold is lower for small businesses, recognizing that they might not export as much as larger businesses, but we still want them to be supported and help them grow into being export champions. Additionally, this program is open to suppliers to exporters. We think those would be a lot of small businesses there supplying to the major OEMs. We want to make sure we're helping build resilient supply chains, not just helping the direct exporter. That said, all transactions in the domestic finance initiative will need to go to board, at least to start. Historically, EXIM has delegated authority internally to the bank for transactions under 25 million. Recognizing this is a new initiative and wanting transparency for our board and for the public, the board will want to review all these transactions. That said, I want to stress our board is not like some that meets only every quarter. Our board meets as often as needed, including weekly, and I've even seen them meet more than weekly. So if we get a good tempo of transactions, they will certainly be able to review them quickly, and they can review more than one transaction at a time. I think that answered the questions, though.
And Scott, just can you dig in a little bit more about the program, like a little bit about when it will launch, how business owners will be able to access the financing? And I know that the board just approved this last week, I believe, if I have my timeline correct. So I know there was a lot of work being done, but is there just a little bit more that you can expound on the mechanics of the program?
Yes. So applications will be very similar to how people currently apply. We have online application systems. We're in the process of updating these because we do need some slightly different information for domestic transactions compared to our foreign ones, but a lot of it is still the same in terms of underwriting and all that. At the moment, we have a web portal specifically for domestic finance transactions, domestic.finance@exim.gov. It which can be directed there, and we can help make sure people are getting the answer to their questions, whether it's on broader policy questions, underwriting, etc. So over the coming weeks, we'll be beefing up that information and making sure everything is updated to make it as smooth as possible for folks to apply.
I think Stephanie, Scott, and Sameera, feel free to also jump in on this question. I think there's a lot of businesses on today's call who are listening live or on the stream, or will listen to it later, who have never interacted with the Export-Import Bank previously. Could you speak a little bit to how the bank works? I think how in this specific program you look to support small businesses. And I know you mentioned a website, which we can also include in the email that we send afterwards, but just a little bit more about the bank, what they do. And I think some of the exciting things coming that you potentially see this new financing program offer small businesses.
Sure. So the bank has a wide range of tools already for small businesses. We have an entire office of small business where we house our export credit insurance and working capital guarantee facilities. It's really a priority for EXIM. I think it's telling that the head of that unit, Jim Burrows, was our acting chair while we waited for Chair Lewis to be confirmed. So it's definitely a priority. What this does is complement those. So small businesses, they sell on open account terms. EXIM can insure those receivables. If they can't borrow from their bank against their foreign accounts receivables due to the risk, we can guarantee those bank loans to make sure they have sufficient working capital to fulfill export orders. And now we can lend to them directly to help them invest in the equipment they need to grow and expand and export more. And that's sort of how this new initiative fits into that. In terms of mechanics, the applications will be similar to our current one. Our current ones, we have a program called EXIM Online, which our medium-term transactions go through, and most small businesses would be looking to use that, I believe.
Excellent. I know, and again, there's a lot of questions related to the website. Would you mind saying the URL again so that people can write that down, and we'll put it in the chat as well, Scott?
Yes, I will. Let me just make sure I get it. And
again, I think it's a lot of interest. I also want to just confirm with you all too that this program is open to all small businesses. And I know that the Biden-Harris administration has made quite a big commitment to equity. So some questions related to, Black-owned businesses, Native American-owned businesses, wanting to make sure that they're eligible and accessible, and this program is accessible to them.
Yes. So I mentioned the lower threshold for small businesses. That actually applies to all our charter priority sectors, which includes minority women-owned businesses, veteran disabled-owned, and a few others. So that's a key priority of the initiative. And the URL is rather long. It's www.exim.gov/about/special initiatives/make more in America.
All right. Someone, the PPS team will go pull that and put that in the chat, and we'll also include it in the follow-up email. So appreciate that, Scott. Sameera, if I can turn to you and again, dovetail a little bit on a couple of questions related to, again, the COVID-19 pandemic has hit Main Street American businesses hard. And I think it has impacted businesses' ability to export. There's a lot of conversation in the chat about, the tight labor market, the supply chain being broken. There's a lot of work. Can you speak just to a little bit more, in addition to the domestic financing program that the Export-Import Bank is launching? What are some of the other initiatives that the administration is doing to expand the ability for U.S. businesses to continue to export, but also enter the exporting arena?
Sure. So one important piece of work that we've been doing is focus on our transportation and logistics supply chain. So we know that one thing that has been impacting businesses is that they can't get the inputs overseas that they depend on, or some of the products that they are making overseas and need to sell over here. And so we have put in place a task force that works on the transportation and logistics supply chain disruptions that have arisen as a result of the global pandemic. And we have a port envoy, John Fakari, who has helped decongest, especially the ports in LA and Long Beach, which are a crucial entry point for goods in and out of this country. 40% of all imports and 30% of all exports go through that one single port complex. And what we've seen is a 50% reduction in what we call long dwell containers, which is a big signal of whether goods are able to move through those ports since we've taken action, since the work that we've done to get ocean carriers, trucking companies, rail companies, terminal operators to all work together and speed the movement of product through the system. We also have in place the State Department and Commerce Department work together to monitor disruptions overseas in our Asian trading partners related to the pandemic. So you've seen lockdowns in Shanghai and Shenzhen in China, and we have a team in place who is in close dialogue with companies trying to clear bottlenecks where we can, and dialogue with our international diplomatic partners on steps and actions they can be taking to safely reopen. We've done that with a number of countries overseas over the course of the past year to improve fluidity of our supply chain. We've also had some great success trying to bring new trucking capacity online. So we've seen that we made a big push on truck driver retention, recruitment, and training at the end of last year. And as a result, what we've seen is we had a record number of CDL issuances in January and February. So and trucking employment has now exceeded pre-pandemic levels. We are on track to double registered apprenticeships, so like new entrants who are well trained in trucking. And we had major new companies from Pepsi to Albertsons all and UPS all sign up for a new accelerated training and hiring program for truck drivers. So I think we've been able to make some really good inroads there to make sure that businesses are getting the support that they need. And what we've seen is, as a result of these efforts, is inventories have been rebuilt. Inventories, if you exclude autos, which is a very unique case because of the global chip shortage, inventories are back up above pre-pandemic levels. So we're seeing that inventories are being rebuilt. It's a metric we track very closely, and that on-shelf availability in stores is at about 90% now. It was at 91% just before the pandemic hit. So thankfully, despite a historic volume of goods flowing through our supply chain, it is adapting and is pivoting, and we are continuing to work with firms large and small to identify what more we can do to help to clear those kind of blockages.
That's interesting. I have a question to close out our time together as it relates to, I think, perception versus reality, which I think you just touched on, Sameera. Interesting that it's at 90 and before the pandemic, it was at 91, which, I know there's a percentage difference, but it doesn't seem so big. And yet it feels like everyone is quite challenged with the supply chain. Scott, there is a lot of questions coming in. Are you able to speak in broadly? Oh yeah.
Add one thing. I mean,
of course.
That is why we are not taking our foot off the gas.
Oh, of course, we shouldn't.
The data shows that things have improved, but as we continue to talk to companies, they know lead times are still way too high. And that is why we continue to work with them to identify what we can do. It's why I think the working capital features that EXIM has highlighted are really important, because we've heard that companies with this way that inventories and lead times have been need more access to working capital. We've made some changes and improvements to SBA in that regard as well, so that they have the ability to bridge in this current environment.
Well, and I think on that note too, we should be working to not just get us back to where we are at, but to improve and make sure that we're more efficient and there aren't, opportunities for that shock to happen, down the road. Hopefully, nothing like a global pandemic happens again. But I think the efforts are really, about innovation and strengthening our supply chains and our ability to move goods around this global economy. And so not only should the foot not be taken off the gas, but I'm really excited to hear more about where innovation is potentially happening within the government and how business owners, I think, really do want to be a part of those solutions and fixing for the future challenges. Scott, there are some questions, and I don't know if you're able to speak in specifics or in generalities, but really more about what are the types of programs that you see with this new tool being deployed by the bank that the projects could be used for? Like, how could a small business owner, what is it? What could they be thinking about? I mean, they're very entrepreneurial by nature. So you're talking to a lot of them right now who the wheels are turning about, okay, this is exciting. I want to be a part of the solution. How could I access this financing and what for?
Sure. And if I miss anything, Stephanie, please let me know. So I think the idea would be for a small business is you are currently selling a good amount, hopefully, and you're looking to expand into more overseas sales. We need to increase your capacity to produce. So you need to buy new equipment. And maybe your local bank, your regional bank, is not willing to fund that or not willing to lend at a sufficient term to make that viable. That's where EXIM can come in. We can either guarantee that bank loan that might make them more willing to deploy more capital or take longer tenor, or if needed, we can also do direct loans, though our strong preference is always to work through our bank partners for guarantees. It's a lot more efficient for everyone involved if there's a bank. That would be the high level for this new program. For working capital, we've long had a working capital program where, again, your bank might lend against your domestic accounts receivables, but they exclude your foreign accounts receivables from the borrowing base. That's where an EXIM working capital guarantee comes in to support that. And finally, again, our existing export credit insurance, if you want to sell overseas on open account terms to be more competitive, we can insure those receivables either to mitigate your own risk or, again, to make your bank more comfortable with lending against those receivables. So those are the sort of the general ideas of where we step in and where we think this new initiative will help out increasing manufacturing capacity in the United States.
And Katie, I can put a bit of a finer point on it. For the Make More in America initiative, as Scott was talking about, helping these companies increase their production capacity in order to export. What we're looking there in terms of, I saw some questions in the chat about how do I qualify for this? What's the criteria? And that's the case where 15% of revenues would either need to be connected to exports now or projected to be connected. That if you help us increase this manufacturing capability, then we will be exporting at least 15% of revenues. And like Scott said earlier, we're really trying to incentivize the areas of that Congress has asked us to focus on in our charter. So that includes small businesses, that includes renewable energy and climate-friendly technologies as well. And so where I think we've been very strong on the helping the more developed, mature companies that are exporting abroad to make sure that they're mitigating their risk, they have the liquidity they need. The Make More in America initiative really is that beginning part of the process where we're hoping to walk hand in hand with companies located in the United States to help them manufacture more in the attempt to get them exporting more abroad as well. And so really this complements kind of the full set of tools and resources that we can offer, with the goal of increasing U.S. exports, U.S. jobs through exports.
Sameera, did you want to say something? Okay. So I know we're a little bit close to time. Before I ask our last question, which Stephanie, if I can even have you respond to, I would appreciate it. But is there anything else that through the conversation that we need to touch on before we conclude, or you just want to triple, quadruple emphasize as it relates to this new tool and all of the tools across the federal government that are being deployed in support of recovery?
Yeah, I would just highlight that our website, which has recently been updated, is a huge resource for folks. And so I think, there are specific links there, whether you're a small business or, if you're looking for domestic financing versus export credit insurance, or you just want to know what is export credit insurance, what is this working capital support that you provide. Really encouraging folks to go to our website. It has, information about who to reach out, to contact, to ask the deeper questions, to see if this is something, if we offer tools that could be supportive to these companies.
And we did put the link in the chat, and again, we will include it in our push out email following the event as well. But I do think it's interesting. You always have to know how savvy business owners are, and interestingly enough, there was a question about SBA's 8.8 program. Scott, correct me if I'm wrong. Is the domestic financing program an attempt to kind of mirror that, or how would you describe it in those terms, if that makes any sense, if that wasn't a garbled question?
Yeah, it's definitely similar. It can be used for similar things, or for SBA's international trade loan program. We are not limited to small businesses, so we can, for the medium-sized enterprises that we've heard maybe are too small to get financing from the capital markets or the largest banks, but are too big for SBA, that's a role we can certainly play. And then, we can complement the SBA programs in for small businesses if, they've hit their sort of limits on exposure, or the transaction ticket size is too big for them despite being a small business.
And one last question, Scott, and Stephanie, to you guys. Oh, go ahead, Sameera.
I think sometimes business owners get frustrated. They go to SBA and they find out they're too big and they didn't expect to be considered too big. And so if you hear that and you've gone to the SBA window, you should come to EXIM and say, maybe this is a better product for me.
Thank you for that. And I do want to also just ask and confirm that resources will be provided in a multitude of languages or will be added to the website. That is one thing that was in the chat, specifically Spanish, and of course within the AAPI communities. If not, perhaps we could encourage those materials to be in multi-language so that they can be accessible.
Yes, certainly. We can work with our communications team to confirm that. And if not, work on making that happen.
Perfect. Thank you, Stephanie. Okay, so my last question that I'd love for all three of you to respond to. We talk a lot about the hardship of COVID-19, but I'd love for each of you to maybe share one thing that you're really excited about as it relates to if it's the Make More in America broader initiative, or other commitments that are happening across the federal government that you feel small business owners should know about, should hear about directly from you all, and should be excited about. So Stephanie, not to throw you up there first, but would you maybe share something that you're excited about?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll just say what you just said. It really is the Make More in America initiative. I mean, this is a pretty big deal that EXIM's board approved this. It's something that had been talked about for a long time, but really going forward and making sure that we have this resource for companies, and the fact that we're really trying to highlight and encourage small businesses through that lower export nexus to really help the companies get off the ground. I think we'd be remiss to start being excited about other things when this one's just getting off the ground. So
that is 100% fair. So it's always good to be excited about what you're working on. Scott, same answer, or is there something you'd like to add or tweak a little bit?
No, I absolutely agree. And I would just highlight, I think it's a good sign for EXIM that, Chair Lewis was here for, I think, less than 2 months, and we were already have accomplished this massive change. And I think we have, perhaps more coming down the pipeline, but we're digesting, at least I'm digesting this right now.
Awesome. Sameera, how about you?
I spend a lot of time reading data, and the data makes me hopeful that we're trending in the right direction. In 2021, we saw Americans apply to start almost 5.5 million new businesses. That's 69% higher than the annual average from the 5 years before that, from 2015 to 2019. We were only at about 3.2 million a year in those years. And we're seeing a boom in new businesses be really broad-based. Entrepreneurship rates have increased amongst immigrants, Black and Latinx Americans. We want to keep building from that strength. You have a president who is deeply committed to small businesses, who is deeply committed to diverse small businesses getting to grow and expand. He put in place historic new programs, which I've laid out today, not just EXIM's Make It in America, but the Treasury Department State Small Business Credit Initiative, the new Community Navigators program at SBA, to deepen the reach of technical assistance programs. And on top of that, he doubled the federal government's goals on small disadvantaged business procurement, which I'm not sure if many of your listeners are aware of. And so you'll see more and more government agencies issuing government procurement contracts to small businesses. And that has gone into effect in this new fiscal year, new targets for each of the agencies to make sure that they are buying more from small businesses. The top priority for the president, we're on track towards 15% over the next 5 years, and agencies have an 11% goal for this year. The federal government has an 11% goal, and so SBA has an incredible team leading that effort and working closely with us at the White House to make sure the agencies meet those new goals. So I hope all your listeners are able to take advantage of that, and we're really focused on new entrants coming into the market as well, because we know people have challenges kind of becoming a government contractor, and that's a big priority of ours.
Yeah, I know there's a lot happening. I think, the more that we can engage directly with, hundreds of business owners and lead them. There's also quite a bit of questions in the chat, just resources, information, which of course, that's what the business leader briefing is all about, is making that connection. We will follow up. We also did have almost like over 100 questions. So I hopefully was able to weave enough of them together to get them answered, but I want to be respectful as we approach the end of our time together. And I just want to thank Chair Lewis for her time. Sameera, thank you. Scott and Stephanie, thank you for joining us, answering a whole host of questions and being really just generous with your time. For all of you that did join us, please note that we will send the recording out. We will send the links that Scott specifically mentioned. We of course can always look at our resources with Public-Private Strategies Institute. And if you have any questions, while we are not experts in domestic financing programs or Make More in America initiative, we definitely have good friends who we can connect you with and try to make sure that you are connected and have the information to be successful. The point that Sameera made at the end that I just want to acknowledge as we conclude our call is how resilient and strong the small business community is. I know the COVID pandemic was challenging for all of you probably on the call. And I know that some of you maybe had to close businesses or make tough choices, but I just want to acknowledge the perseverance within the small business community. And I certainly hope if it's not the domestic financing program, it could be the Community Navigator program at SBA. If it's the SSBCI grant program, there's a whole host of resources and activities that are happening to not only help small businesses recover, but to Sameera's point, help new people come into small business ownership, because I know regardless of the tough times, it is incredibly impactful and empowering to the millions and millions of small business owners across the country. So with that, I want to just thank everyone for their time. Thank Chair Lewis, thank Sameera, thank the team at Export-Import Bank for making themselves available to answer questions. And certainly hope we'll see you on the next business leader briefing. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your Friday.